Hello everybody, welcome to our chapter 1.5, The Politics of Declamation, From Forum to Boardroom. Your lecturer, B.M. Romo, leadership coach and Roman declamation enthusiast, and as you are also a student. Let's begin today with a wonderful chapter in which we will be covering several interesting aspects. We would like to start the session with a declamation example from a fellow student. The declamation is called Europe, Viro Forti Premium of the Common Good. Leadership to forge a strong Europe at the center of the common good in wartime times. Let's begin reviewing this declamation. So you can review, you can watch, you can take some notes about it and its components. Number one, the crucible. Europe is an iron ship caught between two powerful currents, the rising will of sovereign states and the undertow of citizen frustration. The keel groans while neighbors argue over dwindling coal and hostile winds lash the mast. Yet, an unlit lantern still hangs at the prow, symbol of the common good that must guide us through the storm. If the helmsman is blind, the lantern is useless. If the lantern is bright, but the crew and captain pull in opposite directions, the vessel spins in place. In this crucible, we decide whether Europe becomes a sword torn inward or a bridge across the straits of fear. Number two, choosing the anvil. Leadership is more than steering. It is a discipline of containing the right anvil on which to hammer a strong Europe. Institutions must temper law with mercy, power with proximity, sovereignty with solidarity. Wartime proves that bread, shelter, and trust are as vital as steel and power. A Europe that bears deterrence with dignity can hold the line without losing its soul. To this, Europe's exemplary anvil. The Union already bears the hammer marks of the boldest regional forge in modern history. The Customs Union, complete on January 1, 1968, removed internal tariffs from industrial goods and placed agriculture under a shared policy, proving that deep integration can weld prosperity to democratic discipline. Later, the single market extended four freedoms: goods, services, capital, people, under a legal order in which the Court of Justice safeguards the rule of law. No other bloc matches this blend of market liberty and rights protection. Bridge to the Roman frame. That very success now calls for a fresh casting, for enlargement and globalization have stretched the old mold close to freaking. Number three, declamatory foundations. Roman declaimers will recognize our dilemma. Patria potestas still asks who bears ultimate responsibility, union or state. Vita necessic potestas lurks in every sanctions list and conscription law. A renewed lex indemnitorium must shield the vulnerable from the collateral damage of your politics, because experis judici est amor, love stands outside court yet must inform the verdict. Policy should be plus quam civilia, for interdum prestat and gloriam, non certare quam vincere. Sometimes honor rests in refusing to fight rather than in winning. Bellis enim nollis. Literally, whatever you wish, it or not, was a Roman legal tag indicating that certain duties are inescapable. In today's context, it reminds Europe that the storms of war, migration, and digital insecurity cannot be dodged. That union must act, willingly or unwillingly, or risk being acted upon. Still the storms rages and gold needs fire to prove its worth. When crises strike, let us distinguish crimen out error before judging, lest we echo the lament of Fortuna Crudelis. Europe must guard against prodigio and the silent abolitio judici that follows when justice is neglected. Number 4. The moral ledger. This century is dense with heroism and treachery, desertion and loyalty. Fear stocks trenches, both literal and digital, while guilt and reward bargain within each conscience. Yet solidarity and honor can outweigh rumor and resentment. Family honor, once enclosed by hearth and surname, now binds Warsaw to Lisbon and Helsinki to Palermo. Reputation shatters like crystal, yet shared glory endures like marble. If merit earns recognition and love enables voluntas, purity of virtue will stand innocent against tyranny. For this, lessons for the world. Europe's world seems serve as blueprints elsewhere. Mercosur, WAEMU, and Asian have copied its rivets. Common tariffs here, dispute courts there, only to learn that without a social kill, ships lists in heavy seas. By recommitting to solidarity at home, Europe converts private virtue into a public export, proof that regional power can be earned rather than imposed. The sententia to steer by in this short declamation. Aurum igni probatur. Gold is tested by fire, so are peoples by adversity. Seneca. Fortes fortuna adjuvat. Fortune favors the brave, provided courage serves the many. Cicero. Crescit in adversis virtus. Virtue grows in hardship. Let every hospital, plant amid ruins, confirm it. Calpurnius Flaccus. Vox populi, vox Dei. The people's voice can echo the divine when we heed the poorest whisper. From Quintilian. We choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Kennedy's reminder that glory often lies on the steepest and most difficult path. Fire and gold, courage and fortune, the hard choice embraced because it is right. These form the compass for a continent that must become Viro Forti Premium, reward for the strong, not in arms, but in moral stature. Let's conclude here. Europe stands at a decisive juncture. In past success in marrying markets with right probes, that collective resolve can tame centrifugal forces. Yet the tempest of war, disinformation, and economic strain now test every seam. A strong Europe anchored in solidarity is no ideological luxury, it is existential necessity. By blending classical wisdom with modern ingenuity, the union can temper power with justice, replace suspicion with trust, and turn its lantern into a beacon for other regions. If it falls, if it fails, the ship risks breaking on the reefs of division. If it succeeds, it will earn the only prize worthy of a brave people, lasting peace rooted in the common good. The choice is ours, bellis enim nollis, whether to drift or steer with purpose toward calmer seas. Thank you, dear student, for sharing this declamation, which is based on some articles from A Casamento and A Balbo, Problems of Paremiography in Calpurnius Flaccus, in the book Reading Roman Declamation about Calpurnius Flaccus. So, said this, thank you for joining today. As you can see, some sentences that are pasted on your screen. Augumini probatur, fortes fortuna juvat, crescit in adversis virtus, vox populi vox Dei, and the one from Kennedy. Pick one or two and try to develop some ideas around it for your activity. Said this, let's begin with our chapter's content on the politics of declamation. Imagine a classroom in ancient Rome. Young orators rise one by one to plead impossible cases. A pirate who adopts his captive, a son who offers his life to end a plague, a daughter who digs up her brother's bones in defiance of the law. On the surface, these are school exercises, say fiction to sharpen wit and voice like the ones we are doing here. Yet every speech trembles with real-world stakes. In the clash between family loyalty and civic duty, between written law and moral justice, Rome rehearses its deepest political anxieties. So, let's go deep with our anxieties. Choose one of the sentences posted here and start developing your own declamation. Okay, said this, let's begin with our chapter's content. We will be posting some excerpts from declamations and narrate the content. Welcome. Please try to meditate for a minute or two. Be here and now. Be comfortable in your chair, behind your eyes, at the center of your head. Turn off the music from your head, the noise, and start attaching to signal. Take a deep breath, close your eyes, scan your body. Where are you now? Where are you? Where did you come from? How are you feeling in your emotions, your feelings, your ideas? Reflect a moment on them. And if you want, write them on a piece of paper. Your feelings, what are your feelings, what are your emotions, where are you coming from? What do you want to expect? What do you want to learn from this chapter's content on the politics of declamation? We are moving fast forward with our declamatory contents. So please stay with me. Write your emotions, your feelings, some ideas that you have, what you remember from the past declamation session about the culture in declamation, the harsh of some excerpts from declamations. Try to recall your memory a bit, clear the noise from stress, from life, from city, and let's enter Sophistopolis. We are getting to the nitty-gritty of the declamation part with this chapter's content. Okay, so welcome. This is lecturer B.M. Romo. Let's begin. The meticulous prosopographical study of Seneca the Elder, published some years ago by Elvira Migliario, concludes that the anthology preserves materials that date to around 35 BCE, extending to cover the entire period of Tiberius. Thus, the moment when school declamation reaches its full immaturity coincides with the upheaval of the last civil war, with the rise of Octavian, later Augustus, to the heights of the republican regime, and the slow transformation of this regime into a government of one, with the definitive consolidation of the new political situation, linked to the succession of Tiberius, when it was clear that the very long reign of Augustus was not a parenthesis in the institution history of Rome, but a turning point without real alternatives and irreversible. It would be reasonable to expect that this turn of events, which appear decisive to us, and which were perceived as such by those living through them, were echoed also in the environment of the rhetorical schools. And yet, looking at Seneca's anthology, so rich in stories and populated by more than 100 orators and rhetoricians, does not seem to show any trace of this politics. To tell the truth, there have been those who have seen in the schools of declamation a sort of lair of nostalgic philo-republicans, almost the expression of an intellectual resistance to the new political reality, and in some cases the profile that Seneca provides of this or that declaimer does reveal nostalgic attitudes. So, if you like the theme of nostalgic attitudes about some great period from the past that you would like to recall, take some notes on that and let's start developing. For example, Seneca marvels in that in the prime of the Augustan Principate, and thus in such an absolute situation of peace, Titus Labienus still nursed his Pompeian spirits, but this attitude characterizes a very small set among the many mentioned by Seneca, and except for very rare cases, does not influence their professional activity. So the idea of the school as sites of protest against the imperial regime should probably be abandoned. Naturally, the question of Seneca's own political position. He is often considered a nostalgic lover of the past. Is different and not strictly relevant to our discussion. So I will limit ourselves to only a brief consideration. In fact, the figure of Augustus is treated with great respect in Seneca's orators and rhetoricians, and the forbearance the Princeps showed toward disrespectful expressions of dissent is often praised here. However, there is one aspect Seneca expressly condemns, even if this condemnation is attenuated by a certain caution: the repression of intellectual nonconformity. A question that evidently, as a scholar, and above all, as the author of historical work that touch on hot contemporary topics, Seneca must have had great interest in it. Certainly, the long passage is which he recounts how the historical work of Labienus was born in Augustus' final years. Precisely, one supposes, because of the Pompeian spirits that motivated his author and probably informed his writings. He is the harshest and most politically engaged of the entire Senecan corpus. At that point, however, Seneca took for granted what must have been the official version of the episode, according to which the Senate ordered the destruction of the book scrolls on the initiative of unnamed personal enemies of the historian. Naturally, Seneca was too savvy not to realize that the Senate would not have acted without the emperor's approval, but prudently chose to follow the Vulgate the emperor intended to circulate about a disagreeable event. Seneca explains that this noble punishment of burning was conceived against dissident literature. Then, for the first time, he knew very well that there had been at least one other episode in 25 CE, when the work of Promocius Cordus was consigned to the flames of fire for similar reasons. Seneca may even have been an eyewitness of the latter episode, but he omits any mention of it, except to take the satisfaction of quoting in laudatory terms two fragments of Cremutius, whose work, like Labienus, had returned into circulation as a kind of posthumous compensation for the regime's treatment. Though of great interest, this is outside the scope of our study, but it is worth asking if the impression of declamation absolute apoliticalness stands up the deeper examination of the collections in our possession. In the first place, we know from Seneca again, who is the only one to provide first-hand information in this regard, that prominent members of the political class participated in the practice of declamation as a form of refined intellectual divertissement. Asinius Pollio is one example, but Augustus himself also occasionally joined in sessions of the rhetorical schools, accompanied by his entourage, Agrippa Mecenas. This may have been part of the patronage of intellectual activity in general that the princeps tried to exercise, and reveals his interest in monitoring from up close a branch of the educational system that was beginning to take on more and more relevance within the schooling of the future ruling class, and in particular of that sector of society which Augustan politics was aimed at nourishing. Elsewhere, Seneca reports judgments expressed by the princeps regarding individual declaimers, or vice versa, expressions used by a declaimer that relate to the emperor. Even if we cannot know if such utterances came in the context of sessions attended by Augustus or on some other occasion. Unfortunately, we do not possess much similar information for later periods, but a couple of exceptions help illuminate the development of relations between political power and activity of the schools. From two passages of Severian historian Dio Cassius, we learn that Caligula exiled several teachers of rhetoric, accused of having declaimed against the tyrants, and that Domitian even executed some. Unfortunately, this information is not embellished with further details about the figures in question and the reasons for their conflict with the two emperors. However, we are less certain now of what we have claimed in the past, that reference to the professional activity of these two rhetoricians was only a cover for other, more substantial political motivations as a basis for punitive measures. Especially in the case of Domitian, it is well known that he was inclined to see malicious allusions everywhere, and often reacted to this outrageously. For example, when he not only destroyed the historical work of a certain Hermogenes of Tarsus, the content of which we do not know, but also punished the scribes who had copied it, lest the content of that text survive at all. From Suetonius' Life of Domitian, it is possible then that some emperors saw in the activities of some schoolmasters and declamators and rhetoricians signs of protest against the regimes. The more dangerous they appeared to be, the more hidden they were behind the commonest themes of rhetorical exercise, as sources external to the world of the school seems to confirm. The tyrants of tragedy, as well as those of declamation, nourished such interpretations moreover. Under Tiberius, Mamercus Aelius Carus, a political and literary figure, as well as an adherent of the school of declamation mentioned by Seneca the Elder, was punished because the emperor had read his tragedy Atreus as an allusion to his ferocity. Among others, again Dio Cassius is our source. Several decades later, one of the protagonists of Tacitus' Dialogus de Oratoribus, Curatius Maternus, states that he convenes the plot of another tragedy about the same myth, Thyestes, containing unequivocal references to contemporary political reality, after one of his earlier works on the figure of Cato Uticensis provoked discontent and resentment within the imperial court. Presumably for its philo-republicanism, we cannot rule out of Tacitus Curiatus may be related to the sophist Maternus, executed by Domitian for anti-tyrannical sentiments. Both tragedy and school exercises could serve then as an easy alibi for alluding to real tyrants in power in Rome, or at least expose themselves to the risk of being read in this way and of being censored. The fortune of the myth of Atreus and Thyestes throughout the Julio-Claudian period, including allusions to that myth in declamation, is probably also explainable in this way. This helps also understand the problem of the politicalness of the declamations concerning tyrants and tyrannicide, a great topic that you could develop. To what degree they might allude to the Principate or could be read as such. Scholars are hardly unanimous on this score, whereas Emmanuel Berti considers quite unreasonable. Many scholars attempt to relate the tyrants of the controversiae to the concrete figure of the Princeps, and the contemporaneous debate around the form of the Principate. For Laurent Pernon, we should consider the possibility that declamations concerning tyrants have had implications in the contemporaneous reality of the declaimers. On a question like this, it is difficult to draw from conclusions, and we probably need to trust in the interpretation that appears most likely. We personally are inclined to attribute to school themes about tyranny a very strong degree of allusiveness to the present realities of imperial power, not because they refer to this or that emperor, which would have been difficult given the strongly stereotyped character of such themes, but because they offer an opportunity to reflect on the nature and limits of this very power. Reflection that in all likelihood seem present given the new historical political context in which the declaimers operated. Reflections on questions of power and its legitimate scope cut through declamation in its entirety. The power of a father to disinherit a disobedient son, the power of a husband to divorce his wife, the power for prize winners to violate other laws because of the total freedom given to them in choosing a prize, and so on. In all these cases, and in many others, what is at stake is determining what an individual can and cannot do, based on the prerogatives he or she can claim. That debates at every controversial stages, where the actions of each party are accurately weighted up to establish if they have gone beyond the bounds in trying to take advantage of these prerogatives, are nothing but an endless series of reflections and forms of power and its legitimate exercise. An intrinsically political theme, if ever there was one. If all this is true, then controversia that have tyrants as protagonists can also be interpreted as a reflection on this special form of authority, but with a specific and decisive differences. In all the cases that we have mentioned, the prerogatives of the parties are established by law. A father can disinherit a son, or a husband divorce his wife, because in Sophistopolis there are laws that give them this right, and it is a fictional, but that is irrelevant, law that awards a prize to a vir fortis or a tyrannicide. Remember, prizes to the vir fortis and to a tyrannicide. Conflict arises in such cases, either because the counterparty has a right of appeal, that is, the chance to oppose an abdicatio or disinheritance in court when it is deemed unjust, or because in the case of controversy about prices, the heroes request conflicts with other principles protected by law, as when the vir fortis chooses to wed a vestal virgin or his own daughter. The problem does not exist with respect to the tyrant, of course. The power of the autocrat is by definition unconstrained and can be exercised against any existing law, and despite anything belonging to the sphere of the law, or the less formalized but equally binding sphere of mores. This feature of tyrannical power is not unlikely the authority of Roman emperors, particularly as we get farther and farther from Augustus and into the Julio-Claudian period, until in the Siberian period. It is formalized by Ulpian in the famous adage, Quod principi placuit legis abet vigorem. So the tyrants of declamation are a sort of permanent warning against the risks of unconstrained power that has no limits on its absolute will, as we are seeing today from different tyrants throughout the world. If, as has been claimed, certain despotic figures of Senecan drama, above all Atreus, are a kind of counterfactual paideia addressed to Nero, complementary to the lesson given to the same emperor in the Clementia. The main image of the abyss of violence into which unconstrained power risks falling, then similar reasoning can be applied to the school controversies, which teach each new generation of the elite how tyranny is incompatible with the life of a city governed by laws, and how, in the face of despotism, the only possible response is tyrannicide. It is perhaps this lesson, implicit but no less clear, that nourished the suspicion of emperors like Caligula and Domitian. That said, please reflect a moment on these topics: tyrannicides, before this. What politics can be mentioned on the declamation or not? Let's be open here. Open your mind, and if you want to go against a tyrant, to be the B40s, to be the tyrannicide, go ahead and try out different topics surrounding this theme and these characters. So this, we have finished part 1 of the politics of declamation. Please try to write a short declamation surrounding these patterns before this tyrannicide and the different characters like the tyrant, the emperor, the republican. What do you think? The prices that were given to tyrannicides and before this, who in the lives of the tyrants. Thank you for reading me, listening me. If you have any questions, please, you can send me a short message on the comment sections on our LinkedIn. We will be posting this part 1 so you can review it, and we will be posting soon part 2 so we can finish up the current chapter on the politics of declamation. Thank you for hearing, listening, viewing. This was lecturer BM Romo. See you in part 2 on the politics of declamation of our wonderful course from forum to boardroom. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.